Good evening, Mr. Bond. How's it going, everybody? As you can see, I'm not in my typical location. That's because I am dog sitting for Axel, this little guy here, and Junie. Here's a video of her being cute. So it's been a very busy couple of weeks, which has made very little time for videos. But on that note, welcome everybody to another episode of Horror Talk. The show where I randomly talk about some topic of horror, sometimes with a pug. Before we get going here, this is something I did last year during the Christmas season. Since the holidays are coming upon us, I wanted to promote an organization that I think does a lot of good, and that is the Animal Rescue League of Boston. This is an organization that does so much for homeless animals, dogs, cats, and various other critters. It, nurses them back to health, works with them when they've been abused, finds them good homes. It's an organization that I really like to support because there's a lot of homeless pets out there that could use a good home, and I like to promote this organization during the holiday season. So I'm going to leave a link down below. Please visit their website. If you can donate, please donate. It's for a good cause. Finding cute little animals like this, a warm, safe home, that they all deserve. On that note, I don't think he's happy being up here, so I'm going to put him down. Now that we've gotten that wholesomeness out of the way, let's talk about cannibalism. Because nothing screams the holiday season like cannibalism. So yes, as you can see by the title of this video, the topic of today's horror talk is cannibal movies, or at least the subject of cannibalism in horror movies. When it comes to horror, my favorite subgenres are cosmic horror, body horror. I love Italian horror, I love Asian horror, I love slasher movies, serial killer movies, all this, various stuff. But if I were to pick my favorite subject matter in horror movies, I've always had this morbid fascination with cannibalism. Yes, it is a morbid fascination, I admit that, but a lot of people have this morbid curiosity when it comes to certain dark subject matter. You have people that are interested in serial killers. People are interested in cults, like the Jonestown level cults. Everybody has a morbid curiosity for some of the darker things in life, and with me, it's cannibalism. When it comes to society, when it comes to civilized society, cannibalism is viewed as the ultimate taboo. There are a lot of horrible things in this world. You have murder, you have rape, you have human trafficking, you have all this various stuff. Somebody commits those acts, they are considered a monster. But when you hear about a human being eating another human being, it just adds this level of savagery that people never want to believe that a person can go, if that makes any sense. If you hear that someone else has eaten someone else, it just hits you on this level. It hits you right, it hits you in your DNA. It really hits you in your DNA as a human being. It's like you never want to think that anyone could do something like that. And whenever the subject of cannibalism comes up, this thing always pops into somebody's head. It's like, what would it take for someone to commit that act? What would it truly take for someone to go to that extreme? I think everybody once in their life, whenever that subject matter has come up, I think everyone has had that little thought in the back of their mind that says, could I do that? Could I eat another human being? If I were hungry enough, if I were in such a desperate situation, would I be able to do that? Because, I think that nobody here has ever experienced anything like that. I mean, the closest I've come is I've bitten off a hangnail here and there, and I don't mean to brag, but I'm delicious. If you were ever in a situation where you had to commit cannibalism, would you do it? Or if you were like, if you found yourself in one of those tribes, you know, there's like tribes in New Guinea and various other tribes that would commit the act of cannibalism. If you were in that tribe and they offered you a piece of human flesh, would you eat it? I've always debated that myself because, again, there is that curiosity. There is that, it's a sick curiosity, I admit that, but there is that curiosity of what do we taste like? Yes, I admit, it's sick. It is a very sick fascination, but hey, you know, like I said, we all have sick fascinations. Because we've always heard about cannibalism in society, like I talked about those tribes that committed acts of cannibalism, whether it be for ritual reasons or, you know, like there's a belief system. When the ancient tribes committed cannibalism, there were certain reasons for that. One was, it was believed that if you ate somebody, you absorbed their power. And another reason for that is, it's considered like the ultimate form of dominance. Okay, like if you killed an enemy, okay, I killed you, now I'm gonna eat you. So like, which is the ultimate, like the ultimate form of dominance, the ultimate humiliation for that person. But then you've had the situations where someone had to eat another person for survival. We all know about the Donner Party. If you're Donner Party, you know that, yes, the group of settlers who became stranded in the mountains and they ran out of food and they had to resort to cannibalism in order to survive. You know, it's like, it's that, again, that survival instinct, because, like it or not, we as human beings, we are animals, and when so much is taken away from us, we're going to go to those basic elements of survival. And so when it comes to survival, again, would you be able to do that? Would you be able to eat another human being? And then, of course, you had, of course, that Brazilian soccer team that was in that plane crash, and they had to resort to cannibalism in order to survive. But, like, the stories that are, like, really dark are those individuals in our society that we've heard, like, in civilized society, that committed cannibalism for their own demented reasons. Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most notorious serial killers in history, he murdered young men. Not only that, he dismembered them, he cannibalized them, he did other various things with their bodies. There was Armin Muse, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. This was a guy who wanted to cannibalize a volunteer. He wanted to find someone who would willingly be cannibalized by him. And that's a very dark story too. But of course, we're here to talk about cannibalism in film, mostly horror movies. Because cannibalism may not be the most common thing in horror movies, but you do see it in a lot of horror films. When it comes to cannibalism in horror movies, the most common genre that will pop into people's heads is zombie movies. I've gotten a couple requests to do horror talks on zombie movies. The only reason I haven't done it yet is I don't know what else I can say that I haven't already said in other videos. Like, pretty much my thoughts on the zombie genre I have said in various other videos, and I don't know if I can say much more than that, because as you all know, if you've watched this channel for a while, I used to be a huge zombie fan, but I kind of gotten zombied out after a while. Still love various zombie movies, but anyway, moving on. So yeah, zombie movies are one of the most common forms of cannibal movies, if you will. When George Romero made Night of the Living Dead in 1968, that is what created the zombies that we know today, which is undead corpses coming to life and eating the living. You know, how does the zombie plague spread? It spreads through a bite, it spreads through blood and various bodily fluids. When there's a bite or blood involved, or a scratch or whatever, that's how the disease transfers. But the reason the disease is able to transfer like that is because these zombies have this uncontrollable desire to eat people. So, yes, you have that idea of cannibalism in zombie movies. And then it went on, you know, of course, with Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, and the various Romero-esque zombie movies that we've gotten throughout cinema. But the thing about zombie movies and the zombie cannibalism is it's an unconscious cannibalism when you think about it. Because the common theme of a zombie is it's a person who has died and come back from the dead, or someone who has been infected with this disease, and that person is not that person anymore. They are now just this unstoppable force that has this urge to consume humans. The main thing that makes zombies such a dark idea and so frightening is because, you know, again, yeah, they're not very fast, they're not smart at all. There's just so many of them, and they're just there to eat. The terrifying thing about becoming a zombie, or at least a Romero zombie, is your humanity is gone. The body is still there, like your body is still there, but you are gone. Your consciousness is gone, and you're nothing but this empty shell that wants to eat other people. And that's a frightening thought because, okay, you've lost your humanity. You're nothing but this unstoppable force that's eating. The cannibalism in zombie movies is this unconscious cannibalism. It's not necessarily a willing cannibalism. It's this, you know, sort of a cannibalism that's forced onto people, removing everything about that person and just leaving this desire to eat. Which is frightening, but, like, again, the person is gone, so there is no control there. There is nothing there except this empty shell. The zombies that I find the most fascinating are the Return of the Living Dead zombies. Return of the Living Dead was directed by Dan O'Bannon, so let's call them the O'Bannon zombies. What I like about the Return of the Living Dead zombies, and what makes them more horrifying and more tragic than the Romero zombies is, like I said, a Romero zombie doesn't have consciousness. It's just this unstoppable eating machine. Whereas the Return of the Living Dead zombies, they have a consciousness. Like, they can talk, they can run, they can think, they can set traps. They are essentially the person they were when they died, but now they have this need to eat human brains. Like, the Romero zombies, they'll eat a whole person, everything involved in that person. They'll eat everything in that person. But the Return of the Living Dead zombies only focus on the brains. And the reason they're eating brains is because they need to eat brains, because the Return of the Living Dead zombies are in constant pain. They are in agony. And the only thing that fixes that pain is human brains. Devouring human brains makes this pain go away. It's a lot like, you know, drug addiction. You know, when you first take a drug, it feels good, but as you continue to take the drug, you no longer take the drug to get that feeling of wee! You take the drug to stop feeling the pain, you know, because taking drugs after a while, there's no pleasure, it's just pain. And now you're only taking that drug to feel better, to not feel that pain anymore. That's what the Return of the Living Dead zombies are like. They're eating human brains because they need to get rid of that pain. So they are conscious. They know what they're doing. A Romero zombie doesn't know what it's doing. It's just acting on the purest level of instinct. The Return of the Living Dead zombies know what they're doing. And they have to do it. They're basically driven insane by the pain of being dead, and they need to eat human brains to alleviate that pain. And that's why the Return of the Living Dead zombies are like some of my favorite zombies, and they're so tragic in that case. The cannibalism that I am fascinated by is the conscious cannibalism, when someone knows what they're doing. They know the act they're committing. Because that, for me, makes the act of cannibalism even more terrifying. There are, in my mind, when it comes to cannibal movies, you have the 3 different genres, or 3 different types of cannibal movies. There are the cannibal movies where there's a supernatural nature to the cannibalism. You could incorporate zombies into that, but let's step away from the zombies for now. There's the cannibal movies where cannibalism has this supernatural prowess to it. Then you have the cannibal movies that are dealing with like more realistic cannibals, like jungle tribes and jungle, like New Guinea tribes or tribes deep in the Amazon that engage in cannibalism. This is where you find the Italian cannibal movies. And then you have this third category, which is when cannibalism, it's not supernatural, it's not in the middle of the jungle, it's in civilization. Like civilized people, or people who look like normal everyday people, engage in cannibalism. These 3 different categories you see in various movies. Let's focus on the supernatural angle to start with. There's the legend of the Wendigo. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, the Wendigo is a Native American folk creature. It's this Native American legend where it's basically, there's 2 ways that it goes. It's either a person who commits cannibalism turns into this creature that basically needs to eat human flesh it can live for eternity, but it always needs to eat human flesh. So like in this part of the legend, you have a person that commits the act of cannibalism and they turn into a monster. And that monster can live for eternity, but it has to eat human flesh for the rest of its existence. The other angle of this legend is the Wendigo is a spirit. It's this spirit that possesses somebody who engages in cannibalism. So like a person will engage in cannibalism and then the Wendigo will essentially take them over, or something along those lines. There's basically 2 forms of the Wendigo. A person who eats human flesh and becomes a Wendigo, or a person eats human flesh and becomes controlled by this spirit. There's a lot more information out there. I'm sure you just type in Wendigo myth on YouTube or on the website, and you will probably find many people that can describe this legend better than I can, but that's the gist of it. And most of the time, when cannibalism is dealing with that supernatural angle, it involves the Wendigo. A perfect example of this is this horror movie that came out recently, Antlers. I enjoyed Antlers. I won't say it's my favorite horror movie of the year, but I thought it was good. It's an interesting concept. Okay, so you have this little boy whose brother and father become infected by the Wendigo curse, for lack of a better term. And he's got his brother and his dad locked up in their house, but the kid is still going to school, and he's trying to figure out how he can survive and how he can help his family survive. Meanwhile, he has a teacher who can see that something's off. Like, the boy has all the traits of someone who's in an abusive household, and she can see all these warning signs, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, this kid is trying to make sure she doesn't find out what's going on, because he's trying to protect his brother and his dad, who are basically turning into Wendigos. It's a very dark movie, and it's sick because, I mean, sick in a good way, sick in the way that you want a horror movie to be, because you have this kid who has to get food for his dad and his little brother, and you eventually know what direction that goes in. Very dark movie, but that's an example of using the Wendigo myth in a horror movie. And then you have one of the most underrated horror movies of the 90s, Ravenous. But in the case of Ravenous, the villain does not turn into a monster. They still look like a person. The basic story is, I did a review on this. I did a double feature review of Ravenous and Bone Tomahawk, so if you want more details, check out that video, me shamelessly whoring myself out. You have this soldier named Boyd. This is basically during the American-Mexican War. During a battle, he freezes, and which results in his entire platoon getting killed. But he survives by playing dead. And while he's playing dead, he gets, piled up with all the corpses, and then the Mexican soldiers bring him into the fort, and then he's able to take the fort because he was brought in there as a corpse. So he gets promoted for cowardice. Basically, his superiors, they want to punish him, but they know they can't because it would look bad because he did take the enemy fort. So they send him to this fort out in the middle they give him a promotion and send him out to this fort in the middle of nowhere. And while he's out there with various other soldiers, this guy wanders in from the wilderness and talks about how him and his party became stranded out in the mountains for months, and they eventually had to resort to cannibalism. And there's like this guy named Colonel Ives, who was the most savage of the group. And so they go out for a rescue mission, and then it turns out that the guy who claims to be the survivor is actually the villain. Slight spoiler alert, but anyway. And then it builds up from there. But again, in this movie, the subject of cannibalism, eating human flesh has supernatural properties. It can help you live forever. It can heal you when you're wounded. It can get rid of disease. And that's an interesting way to look at cannibalism. Again, cannibalism basically being used for immortality. And you could mix vampire movies in there because that's kind of the same thing. Okay, vampires don't really eat people, but they do drink human blood, so that can be seen as a form of cannibalism. So you could technically put vampire movies in there, and technically include vampire movies in the cannibal genre, although vampire movies don't really fit into the cannibal genre, but it is, when cannibalism is used in the supernatural sense, it's essentially the same thing as vampirism. Vampires drink human blood and they can live forever. Supernatural cannibals eat human flesh and they can live forever. I like that. I kind of like that idea of you can live forever, but in order to do that, you have to eat people. So, you can extend your life by consuming someone else's life. But then you have the category of cannibal films where it focuses on, jungle cannibals or things of that nature. Movies like Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, Mountain of the Cannibal God. Basically the Italian cannibal movies. And Bone Tomahawk, which is not an Italian cannibal movie, it's an American cannibal movie, but it's a Western movie that has cannibalism. Bone Tomahawk is essentially an Italian cannibal movie put in this American setting. And when it comes to, I guess you could say, primitive cannibal movies, essentially, again, the cannibals in these movies are more realistic, for lack of a better term. They're like jungle savages, again, for lack of a better term. People who engage in cannibalism for the sake of ritual or the sake of survival, stuff like that. These movies are known for being a little more extreme, a little more disturbing than most other movies. especially like the Italian cannibal movies. Cannibal Holocaust is definitely the most notorious movie in this genre, but it wasn't the first movie. The first movie in the genre was Man from Deep River by Umberto Lenzi. And Man from Deep River is more of a jungle adventure movie with cannibalism appearing at the end of it. But then, as these movies started coming out more, there started to be a little more focus on cannibalism and, like, torturous things being done on people. Ruggero Deodato, who directed Cannibal Holocaust, made Jungle Holocaust before that. And again, you know, I always have to mention, when it comes to the Italian cannibal movies, they do have animal cruelty in them, which is, you know, something that I don't agree with. You know, animals are killed on camera for the sake of shock value, and I don't think it's right. And again, I've said numerous times, the reason I still watch these movies despite the animal cruelty is because they happened so long ago. There's nothing I can do about it now. All we can do is learn from the past so we don't make the same mistakes in the future. But yes, I don't agree that animals should be killed on camera for the sake of entertainment. But anyway, moving on from that, the Italian Amazon cannibal movies were notorious for their violence, their disturbing imagery, their scenes of torture. And again, Cannibal Holocaust is the most notorious of these movies. People have said Cannibal Holocaust is the first found footage movie, which is kind of true. I did a video, again, me shamelessly whoring myself out. I did a horror talk on found footage movies, and I talk a little more about this in that, so if you want more information, check out that video. But I've always viewed Cannibal Holocaust as an inspiration to found footage movies, but not technically a found footage movie, because for half the movie, you have this professor, Professor Monroe, who is looking for this documentary film crew that went missing in the Amazon. They went to the Amazon jungle to do a documentary on cannibal tribes, and they never came back. So the first half of the movie, you have this professor looking for these film crew, only to find out that they've been killed, and he finds their footage. The second half of the movie is him watching the footage and seeing the atrocities that the film crew has committed against these tribes, which led to their murders. And the reason I don't see Cannibal Holocaust as a full-fledged found footage movie, try saying that 5 times, is not just because the first half is not found footage. It's because in a found footage movie, the main character is the characters on the screen. The characters making the documentary are the main characters. But in Cannibal Holocaust, they're not technically the main characters. The main character is Professor Monroe. We're following him and his journey. So, not so much the journey of the documentary film crew. And when we're watching the footage, and it's found footage style, we're picturing Monroe seeing these tragedies and how he's dealing with that. So that's why I've never considered Cannibal Holocaust to be a true found footage movie, even though it is influential to the found footage genre. If you are into Italian horror movies, and if you're into horror in general, with the wonders of the internet, Cannibal Holocaust has become so notorious, because a lot of people know this, but for those who don't, when Cannibal Holocaust was first released, the director and the producer were arrested because people thought that they actually murdered their actors. Now, what happened here was director Ruggero Deodato, he had the actors in the movie sign a contract, so saying that they could not contact their families for a year after this movie was finished, and they could not appear in any other movies for 1 year after this movie was finished, because he wanted to get this sense that this movie was real. So that happened, and then he got arrested for murdering his actors, or at least that's what people think he did. Ruggero Deodato was in court, and he was watching Cannibal Holocaust in front of a federal judge. The judge wanted to see the footage, and the judge would cringe and wince every time something brutal happened on screen. So Ruggiero Deodato knew he was going to get arrested, so he allowed the actors to break the contract so he could prove that he did not murder them. And so that's why Cannibal Holocaust has become so notorious, because people thought it was real. There's the impaling scene, which I cannot show on YouTube, but it's a scene that I find kind of fascinating. I mean, not kind of fascinating, like I've studied this scene for a long time, and it's a very, very disturbing scene. Basically, I won't go into details, and I won't show it here, but it's the impaling scene. For those who have not seen it, is a woman has been impaled on a spike through one end and out the mouth, and she's up like this. So it's like you have the spike here and the woman's here, and then the stake is in the ground. And it's a very, very haunting scene. The music in the scene is kind of calming, but, you know, which just makes it more disturbing. The documentary film crew is kind of giddy that they found this, because they found something shocking for their movie, but they're trying to hide it. And the woman on the pole is so still. It's so still. This was one of the images that people thought was real. And like the way they did it was, Ruggiero Deodato put a pole in the ground, they put a bicycle seat on that, and they made a piece of balsa wood, and they had the actress sit on that, and then put the balsa wood in her mouth, so it looked like she was, you know, hanging from the stake. You see her out there, she is, like, still. She is very still. But I think the way they found a way around that is, there are scenes where the footage becomes grainy for a second, so, like, you don't see what's going on the screen, you just see static. And I think that's a way they could use to hide any movement that was done on the actress. But I've studied that scene so much, and it's just like, so how the hell did they fucking do that? My God. Like I said, it's a disturbing scene. It's a haunting scene. It's a scene that I know I would never be able to show it on YouTube, but it's a scene that I've always wanted to try to recreate. Just like recreate that particular scene without murder, of course. But using the techniques that Ruggiero Deodato used, I always wanted to see if I could recreate this scene. Just to see if I could do it, but one, I'd have to find an actress who would be willing to do it, because there's a lot of nudity involved in that, and, you know. But anyway, going back to the idea of cannibalism, especially in Cannibal Holocaust, again, the themes of a lot of these movies is you have these civilized people coming into this primitive world and committing terrible acts to these jungle dwellers, to this primitive tribe, and then the primitive tribe basically gets revenge on these people, and then it has the whole question of who are the real savages. The scenes of cannibalism in Cannibal Holocaust are very disturbing. The scenes of cannibalism in most of these movies is very disturbing. And stepping away from the Italian ones for a while, I know I mostly talked about Cannibal Holocaust, but if you talk about Cannibal Holocaust, you've essentially talked about all cannibal films, because they all have these same similarities. But stepping away from the Italian cannibal films and moving over to Bone Tomahawk, because Bone Tomahawk is essentially an Italian cannibal film put in this American Western setting. No animal cruelty, so it makes it a little easier to watch. But again, the concept is the same, you know, but it's a Western. Instead of people going into the Amazon jungle, you have cowboys dealing with these cannibals. It has all the same elements, those same elements of savagery. Because you have scenes in Bone Tomahawk that are just as disturbing as scenes in Cannibal Holocaust. Like, I won't say much, but the wishbone scene in Bone Tomahawk is up there with the impaling scene from Cannibal Holocaust. But I think the reason that these types of movies in this category stick with people so much is because it is a primitive cannibalism. It's a survival element. It's like, if you were to encounter cannibalism, this would be the most realistic way it would be done, with, like, primitive tribes that don't have much interaction with the outside world. So yeah, so that's the second category. So yeah, we have the supernatural cannibal films, we have the jungle cannibal films, and then we have the cannibal films where it's like, the cannibalism is not supernatural, but it's closer to civilization. The let's say, for lack of a better word, the civilized cannibal films. Okay, one of the most notorious cannibal movies of all time, and one of my all-time favorite horror movies, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you would, for those who have not seen it, for the one or two of you horror fans who haven't seen it, you have this group of friends who are on a road trip. Their car breaks down, and they end up running into Leatherface and his family. Now, the whole idea of Cannibal Holocaust is... the whole idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is Leatherface and his family used to work at a slaughterhouse. But then, like, with new technologies at the slaughterhouse and basically business not being great at the slaughterhouse, these people end up losing their jobs. Leatherface, the hitchhiker, their older brother, they worked in the slaughterhouse, and they were people who had violent tendencies, but they were able to release those violent tendencies at the slaughterhouse. These are people that meat is all they've ever known. Working at a slaughterhouse has been their entire life. And then that was taken away from them, and they started running out of money. They needed to survive, so they converted to cannibalism, is essentially the idea of this movie. This family that has been involved in meat and killing livestock all their lives has had that outlet taken away from them, so now they go to cannibalism. Yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, yes, okay, as has been said by many people, it's a movie that has gone down as a very violent movie, but you barely see any blood. I mean, if you watch the movie, it is a movie about cannibalism, but you don't technically see anyone actually eating human flesh. You know that they are eating human flesh, but you don't technically see that. Because, again, the way Texas Chainsaw Massacre works is every violent act is done just off camera or behind closed doors, and then your brain fills in the blanks. There are so many scenes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I love the hallway scene, the hook scene, the scene where Franklin gets it, but focusing on the cannibal angle, another very notorious scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the dinner scene. Another great scene, and the reason it's so effective is, and the reason why I think 70s horror movies are so effective, is they take what's familiar and make that scary. So the dinner scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you have this family sitting down to dinner, just like many of us do every night, or most of us, or like we used to do before Twitter and streaming and watching movies on their phones. But anyway, a lot of people have family dinner. They gather with their family and they eat dinner and they talk for the night. Essentially, this is the same thing that the Sawyer family is doing in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The only difference is they're eating human flesh. So it takes this... The dinner scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre takes this idea of the family dinner and perverts it in a way. You know, it's not just, you know, they're sitting down to dinner, they're honoring their grandfather every night. They have Sally there as a guest, but in this case, Sally is tied up, and she's going to be killed soon, and these people are eating her friends. Again, you don't really see that, but you know that's what they're doing. It's all suggested. But again, yeah, that's what Texas Chainsaw Massacre does with the dinner scene. And it's such a chaotic scene, and it's so demented, and the acting is very, very well done in it. But sticking with that idea of taking the concept of the family and turning it into something savage, we move on to The Hills Have Eyes. Now, this isn't technically civilized, quote-unquote, cannibalism, because it's not really in civilization, it's off the beaten path, but it's still happening in America. The setting of The Hills Have Eyes is in America. And especially back in the 70s and you know, all these situations, when you think cannibalism, you like to think that it couldn't happen here. It couldn't happen close to me. That happens like in New Guinea or the Amazon or places like this. But that's not always the case. Again, Jeffrey Dahmer. But yeah, so it's like it's taking cannibalism and bringing it closer. Because, okay, the plot of The Hills Have Eyes is you have this family in an RV going across country, and again, they get stuck in the middle of the desert, and they run into this feral family of cannibals. I've talked about The Hills Have Eyes quite a few times. I've reviewed it. I included it in my 31 horrors for Halloween. I'm sorry, my favorite 1970s horror movies for Halloween. Again, focusing on the idea of the family dinner. In this case, yes, the cannibal family isn't eating at a dinner table. They're eating around a campfire. But again, it's a family. It's a family of people. You have Papa Jupiter, who's the matriarch of the family. They're all sitting around this fire, and he's eating the arm of Big Bob, who's the father in the Carter family, and this happened earlier. But you have the severed head of Bob, and Papa Jupiter, the father of this family of cannibals, basically eating his arm and talking to his severed head. How many families have gone camping and have sat around the campfire cooking s'mores and joking? In this case, you have the campfire, a family sitting around the fire, eating Big Bob. Oh my god. No, but it's just like, and again, the scene, the part that always sticks out to me in that scene is the fact that you see the meat hanging from Papa Jupiter's mouth, and you know it's human meat, and it just adds this extra element of to that scene. That's the thing I find so fascinating about Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Hills Have Eyes, is taking the concept of the family and throwing cannibalism into that. But yeah, of course you have these various other cannibal movies. You have Wrong Turn, you have Motel Hell. Motel Hell is interesting because it's like unknowing cannibalism. You have this farmer who is essentially making these fritters out of human meat and then serving them to people, and you have people eating this stuff and not knowing that they're eating human flesh. So there's the ignorance, becoming a cannibal through ignorance, through a lack of knowledge, which is also fascinating. There's Cannibal the Musical, which is ridiculous, by the guys who did South Park. Before they did South Park, they did Cannibal the Musical. That's a fun movie. But yes, you have these various different cannibal movies, but I thought I should save this one for the end of this topic. A common theme with all these other various cannibals is savagery. Whether it's in a jungle, like Cannibal Holocaust, or in Texas, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or in the middle of the desert, like The Hills Have Eyes, or in the wilderness, like Wrong Turn, most of these cannibal films, the cannibals are crazy, they are savage, they are uncivilized, they have this they are mentally unstable. But the most fascinating cannibal of them all, you all know who I'm getting into, without question the most fascinating cannibal of any cannibal that appeared in film, is Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter, the thing about Hannibal Lecter is, he is my favorite character of all time. Not just in horror, but film in general. Films, books, TV, video games, back when I used to play video games. Out of all those different forms of pop culture, out of all those different media, Hannibal Lecter has always been my favorite character. Don't judge me too bad, because closely behind Hannibal Lecter is Clarice Starling. But yeah, so Hannibal Lecter has always been my favorite character. Just because he's so fascinating to me. You have this guy who is a cannibal, but he's a very civilized human being. He's very well spoken. He enjoys the finer things in life. He'll eat someone's liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti, but he'll listen to opera. It's just such an interesting contrast, having someone so high class, so civilized, so intelligent, but he eats people. It's that dynamic that I've always found fascinating when it comes to Hannibal Lecter. He is the ultimate form of control. You have characters like the Joker who are chaos. Then you have Hannibal Lecter who is controlled. Yes, he's a cannibal. Yes, he eats people. But he can keep that so hidden. He can, murder someone and not have his heart rate rise up. He can get into people's heads. He is so intelligent that he can get into someone's head just through talking to them. He can damage someone just by talking to them, which is so unsettling. We, the audience, love Hannibal Lecter. I mean, it's just like, in Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill is technically the real villain of the movie. We gotta give it up to Ted Levine. I mean, Anthony Hopkins gets so much credit as Hannibal Lecter. People don't talk about Ted Levine that much as Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill is terrifying. He can really be scary, and you can feel his... The interesting thing about Silence of the Lambs is you can feel Hannibal Lecter's presence throughout the film and Buffalo Bill's presence throughout the film. Anthony Hopkins creates such a presence in that movie, but he's only on screen for like 16 minutes. And Buffalo Bill is on screen less than Hannibal Lecter. But you can feel the presence and the threat of both of them throughout the movie. But going back to Hannibal Lecter, it's just so damn charming. He's so intriguing that we, the audience, grow to like Hannibal Lecter. We're afraid of him, but we like him at the same time. When Hannibal Lecter escapes, we're both horrified, but also we're kind of like... There's a small part of us that are like, yes, he got away. It's like, it's this weird dynamic. It's like with Hannibal Lecter, when he escapes, we're thinking both, all right, he got away, and oh no, he got away. Hannibal Lecter, he's the guy that if you met him at a party, you would want to talk with him for hours, and then he'd probably eat you afterwards, as long as if you're rude to him. If you're not rude to him, then hopefully you'll be okay. And to quickly talk about the TV series Hannibal, I could do a whole horror talk on Hannibal Lecter, on the Hannibal Lecter series, and the Hannibal TV show. Mads Mikkelsen was a fantastic Hannibal Lecter, and I enjoyed seeing that spin on Hannibal Lecter. I enjoyed that in the Hannibal TV series, Mads Mikkelsen made Hannibal Lecter his own. He didn't just do an Anthony Hopkins Hannibal Lecter, he did his own Hannibal Lecter. Which is why it was kind of tricky going into the Hannibal TV series, because everyone knows Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. In everyone's mind, Anthony Hopkins is Hannibal Lecter. And while, yes, Anthony Hopkins is my favorite Hannibal Lecter, I loved Mads Mikkelsen's Hannibal Lecter. Because, again, he made it his own. He made this unique Hannibal Lecter. I like the Hannibal TV series. There are some things that bugged me about it, though. I'll get into that in another video if people are interested. That's pretty much all I have to say about cannibal films at this point in time. I probably could say more, but I would probably end up just repeating myself, and I don't want this video to be too long, but yes. Cannibalism is this really disturbing subject that I have this morbid fascination with. To put everyone's mind at ease, no, I will never eat somebody. Don't worry about it. Unless you want me to, though. That was a sick joke. I apologize. But anyway, but yes, I've always had this dark fascination with cannibalism, and whenever cannibalism is in a horror movie, it takes it up a notch for me, just because it is that ultimate taboo. It's that ultimate, it's like the #1 crime you can commit against someone else, is by eating them. So, on that note, thank you all for watching this video. I do apologize if there are any audio problems. I don't usually film in this location. And sorry for the different background. We will be getting back to the regular location soon. But thank you all for watching. Thank you all for the continued support of this channel. I greatly appreciate those who watch and comment. It does mean a lot to me, and thank you so much. Please leave a comment down below on your thoughts about cannibalism in movies. Let me know some of your favorite cannibal movies. And, yeah, I do want to talk about other, subjects for Horror Talk sometime. I've been debating on putting polls up on my channel for the next Horror Talk and having people vote for what the next subject they would like is. So let me know what you think about that. But until then, I hope you're all having a great day or a great week or whatever. And until next time, this is the Maniac, here to remind you that the Grindhouse will never die. Look at the pug. He's a tired pug. He's like, why do you keep talking in my room? I want to go to bed.